The grand chamber of the Valthian hegemony was a hollowed-out moon, its interior polished to a mirror sheen that reflected the swirling nebulae projected onto its vaulted ceiling. Light, ancient and cold, bled from the celestial holograms, casting long, distorted shadows of the assembled delegates. At the center of this immense space, a circular dais held the High Council, beings of such age and power that their very stillness seemed to bend the light around them. The air was thick with unspoken anxieties, a pressure that had been building for cycles, ever since the first confirmed contact with the species that called themselves human. They were a ghost at this gathering, a specter that haunted every whispered word and every flicker of a counselor's bioluminescent glands. Elder Kalen, whose chitinous exoskeleton was the color of twilight, broke the suffocating silence. His voice, a series of resonant chimes, echoed through the chamber, each note carefully chosen for its weight and gravity. We have convened because the Terran anomaly can no longer be dismissed as a fringe curiosity. Their expansion, while slow by our standards, is relentless. Their methods are opaque. We observe their colony ships, their trade vessels, their scientific probes, but the core of their military strength remains a carefully guarded enigma. Across the dais, Praetor Ves, a being of crystalline structure that refracted the nebula's light into 1,000 shimmering shards, vibrated with a dissonant chord of dismissal. An enigma born of insignificance, Elder. They are a young race barely out of their atmospheric cradle. Their technology is rudimentary, a patchwork of principles we mastered millennia ago. They posture and project an image of strength they do not possess. Their silence on military matters is not a strategy, it is a bluff. A low hum of agreement rippled through some of the assembled delegates, but Kalen's multifaceted eyes remained fixed on Ves. A bluff that has halted the advance of the Scorn ascendancy. A bluff that has pacified the piratical fleets of the Outer Rim. A bluff that has left every intelligence asset we have deployed either blind or dismantled. They do not fight in the way we understand warfare. They do not posture for dominance or engage in glorious fleet actions. They simply resolve conflicts. And in their wake, there is a strange and unsettling peace. It is a peace that feels more like a warning. The mention of the Scorn hushed the chamber. The Scorn were not a subtle force. They were a tide of screaming metal and biological horrors that had consumed entire star systems. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. Yet at the border of human-claimed space, they had stopped. Reports were fragmented, unreliable. Scorn fleets had simply vanished. Not defeated in glorious battle, not pushed back by overwhelming force, but gone. One cycle, they were poised to devour a human colony. The next, there was only silence and drifting, powerless hulks. A third counselor, Matron Zethal of the psionic cephalite consensus, projected her thoughts into the minds of all present, a cool wave of logic that cut through the rising emotion. It is not their silence that is the true concern. It is the stories that fill that silence. Whispers from traders, fragmented data from long-range sensors, panicked transmissions from defeated marauders. They all speak of a phantom. A single, colossal vessel that appears without warning, disables without destruction, and vanishes without a trace. They call it a ghost, a void swimmer, a myth. The humans themselves have never acknowledged its existence. Our analysts have scoured their public transmissions, their cultural archives, their pathetic attempts at interstellar entertainment. There is no record of such a warship. It is a fiction, a legend created by lesser minds to explain their own inadequacies. Praetor Ves's crystalline form flashed with confident light. Precisely. A ghost story. The Scorn likely overextended their supply lines or fell to internal strife. The pirates were probably intimidated by a standard human patrol fleet, their primitive minds inflating its size and capability to save face. We are debating shadows, counselors. We are allowing the anxieties of primitives to dictate the policy of the hegemony. Kalen was not swayed. His chimes became lower, more somber. My contacts within the Scorn Ascendancy's splintered remnants tell a different tale. They are not a people given to myth. Their final reports before communications were severed did not speak of a fleet. They spoke of a singularity, a presence that did not fire weapons but imposed a reality. Their ships were not destroyed, they were rendered inert. Life support, propulsion, weapon systems, all ceased to function simultaneously. The crews were left alive, drifting in the void, a testament to a power that could have annihilated them but chose not to. They were not defeated, we. Ray dismissed. A profound chill settled over the chamber. To disable a fleet was one thing. It spoke of superior energy weapons or electronic warfare. But to simply command a vessel to cease functioning was another reality entirely. It was a violation of the known laws of physics. It was technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic or the will of a god. Zethal's thoughts again washed over them, calmer this time, more analytical. The psychological impact of such an event would be devastating. A warrior race like the Scorn prides itself on a glorious death in battle. To be left alive, powerless, adrift in a metal coffin is a fate worse than annihilation. It is a message. It is a statement of such profound superiority that it transcends the very concept of warfare. If this warship is real, then it is not a weapon of war. It is an instrument of philosophy. A philosophy of terror, Vess countered, his form glowing with a hard, sharp light. A tool of intimidation designed to make the galaxy tremble before a race that lacks the numbers and industrial base to wage a conventional war. They are clever, I will grant them that. They have crafted a perfect weapon, a myth. This warship was a myth until it showed up in battle, a story so potent it defeats enemies before a shot is ever fired. But it is still just a story. We of the hegemony are not so easily frightened. We are the stewards of this galactic arm. It is our duty to see through this charade and expose these humans for what they are. Clever, ambitious upstarts who have overplayed their hand. Kalen slowly rotated his great head, his multifaceted eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates, each a ruler of a star-spanning empire in their own right. And what if it is not a charade, Praetor? What if the myth is real? What if we challenge them, and from the silent depths of their territory, this instrument of philosophy emerges? What do our fleets do when their drive cores simply cease to exist? What do our warriors do when their weapons melt into slag in their hands? We debate in this chamber of manufactured light, shielded by millennia of tradition and technological dominance, but we are debating in the dark. We do not understand their psychology. We do not comprehend their goals. We assume they think as we do in terms of territory, resources, dominance. Every action they have taken suggests otherwise. The debate raged on, a storm of competing philosophies and fears. Some argued for a preemptive strike to shatter the nascent human sphere before it could become a true threat. Others advocated for containment, for a wall of fleets and sensor nets to quarantine this unpredictable species. A few, like Kalen, urged caution and a deeper attempt at understanding. They were trapped in a paradox. To challenge the myth of the human warship risked discovering it was real. To ignore it risked allowing a power of unknown scale to grow unchecked on their very border. Humans, for their part, remained silent. They continued their quiet expansion, terraforming worlds that the hegemony had deemed uninhabitable, establishing intricate trade networks based on principles of mutual benefit rather than exploitation, and broadcasting cultural exchanges that were both bafflingly simplistic and profoundly complex. They shared their music, their art, their philosophies, but never their military schematics. They were an open book with the most important chapter torn out. And so the hegemony did what ancient, powerful empires always do in the face of uncertainty. They formed a committee. They dispatched a diplomatic fleet, a grand armada of vessels from every major species within the council, ostensibly on a mission of peaceful inquiry and cultural exchange. It was a gesture of immense prestige and power, a clear statement that the hegemony was now taking a direct interest. But it was also a probe, a show of force disguised in the velvet glove of diplomacy. The fleet was dispatched to the human capital, a world they called Earth, with a simple, unspoken objective: to force the humans to reveal their hand, to make the myth show itself, or to prove it was nothing more than a ghost story. As the great fleet translated from hyperspace, a glittering host of warships that stretched across the system, they did not know that they were not the ones asking the questions. They were the test. The hegemony fleet was a breathtaking spectacle, a testament to the combined might of a dozen ancient civilizations. Ships like sculpted mountains of obsidian and ivory drifted alongside crystalline bioships that pulsed with internal light. Great, brutalist warships of the Scorn Ascendancy remnants, now allies of convenience, flew wing-to-wing with the elegant, solar-sailed vessels of the Lumini. It was an armada designed to awe, to intimidate, to remind any burgeoning power of the sheer, overwhelming scale of the established galactic order. They arrived at the edge of the Huma. In home system, in the silent, cold space beyond the orbit of their outermost gas giant, and waited. Protocol demanded that the younger race make the first move, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. The hegemony fleet broadcast standard diplomatic hails on all frequencies, their message of peaceful intent translated into 1,000 tongues, including the mathematically precise language of the humans. Then they settled into a patient, watchful orbit, their long-range sensors sweeping the system, cataloging every ship, every station, every satellite. They found a bustling, thriving civilization, but one whose military footprint was, as expected, shockingly small. A handful of patrol cruisers, a few orbital defense platforms around their primary world, and a significant civilian traffic flow. It was the spacefaring equivalent of a walled village in a world of continental empires. The data only seemed to confirm Peter Vess's assessment. The humans were bluffing. For a full rotation of the human homeworld, there was no response. The silence was unnerving. It was not the silence of fear or indecision. It was a calm, deliberate stillness. The civilian ships continued their courses, undeterred by the colossal military presence that had just appeared in their backyard. The orbital stations continued their slow, graceful rotations. The human capital world, a shimmering blue and white marble, continued its silent spin. It was as if the hegemony fleet was not there. This was a profound breach of galactic etiquette, a subtle act of defiance that was more insulting than any open threat. Peter Vess, observing from the bridge of his flagship, the indomitable Will, felt a surge of crystalline fury. "They mock us," he chimed to his command staff. "They treat the combined authority of the hegemony as a passing stellar phenomenon. Send the hail again, but this time on a priority channel, directed at their central governing body." The message was sent, more forceful, more direct, bordering on a demand. And again, silence. The tension on the bridges of the hegemony ships grew thick enough to feel. This was not how first contacts with a dominant power were supposed to go. There should be frantic hails, diplomatic scrambling, a display of appropriate deference. The humans' placid indifference was a psychological weapon of immense power. It suggested a confidence that they had no logical right to possess. Finally, a signal was detected. It was not a broad transmission, but a tightly focused, low-power beam directed at the hegemony flagship alone. It was not a voice or a data packet, but a simple set of coordinates. The coordinates pointed to a location in empty space, roughly halfway between the hegemony fleet and the human homeworld. Following the coordinates was an equally simple message, rendered in perfect, formal hegemonic script. "We will meet you there. Send a single, unarmed shuttle. The safety of your envoy is guaranteed." The audacity of the command sent a fresh wave of shock through the hegemony command structure. They were dictating the terms of the meeting. They were summoning the representatives of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful alliance as if they were errant subordinates. Peter Vess was incandescent with rage. "Unacceptable. We are the hegemony. We do not answer a summons. We do not send unarmed shuttles into empty space on the whim of a pre-hyperspatial primitive. They will receive our full delegation aboard this flagship, or we will advance on their world and they will receive us in the smoking ruins of their cities." But Elder Kalen, connected to the meeting via quantum entanglement comm, projected a calming, resonant chime. "Patience, Peter. This is not arrogance. This is a test. They are observing our reaction. Will we respond with anger and brute force as the scorn would? Or will we respond with curiosity and caution? They are learning more about us in our hesitation than we have learned about them in cycles of observation. Accept their terms." Matron Zethal's psionic voice echoed Kalen's sentiment in the minds of the fleet commanders. "The Elder is correct. Their actions are precise, deliberate. There is no wasted energy, no emotional outburst. This is the behavior of a deeply analytical and confident species. To refuse their terms now would be to admit that we are afraid of an unarmed meeting in empty space. We must send an envoy. We must see this through." Reluctantly, Vess agreed. The hegemony was an institution built on protocol and precedent. A public display of fear was unthinkable. A single diplomatic shuttle, stripped of its weapon systems and broadcasting its harmlessness, was dispatched from the indomitable Will. Aboard was a carefully chosen delegation. A junior diplomat from Vess's own crystalline species, a linguistic specialist, and a low-ranking psionic adept of Zethal's consensus, tasked with subtly gauging the emotional and cognitive state of their counterparts. "Elder." Kalen observed remotely, his ancient mind sifting through every detail. The shuttle moved through the silent void toward the designated coordinates. As it approached, the hegemony fleet's sensors, straining at their maximum resolution, detected nothing. There was no ship waiting for them, no station, no energy signature, just the cold, empty vacuum of space. "They are playing games with us," Vess chimed, his frustration mounting. "They have brought our envoy into the void for no reason." The shuttle arrived at the exact point in space and came to a stop, its engines idling. The pilot sent a short message. "We have arrived at the designated coordinates. We await your vessel." The response from the humans was instantaneous, but it did not come from a ship. It came from the shuttle's own internal comm system. "We are already here." Before the hegemony delegation could process the statement, the shuttle's main view screen, which had been showing the stardusted emptiness of space, flickered. The image did not change, but it shimmered, as if they were looking through a heat haze. Then, slowly, with a silent, graceful majesty that defied all known principles of drive technology, a shape began to resolve itself out of the blackness. It was not a ship. To call it a ship was like calling a star a campfire. It was a geometric impossibility, a section of space that had been perfected. It was a vast, impossibly smooth, featureless ovoid, the color of absolute darkness, so black that it did not reflect light but seemed to absorb it, creating a hole in the universe. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no sensor arrays, no bridge. It was a pure, platonic ideal of form, utterly seamless and silent. Its scale was staggering. The shuttle, itself the size of a small cruiser, was a mote of dust beside it. The entire hegemony fleet, the pride of the galaxy, would have been dwarfed by its sheer, silent presence. On the bridges of the hegemony warships, a collective, unified gasp was felt. Every sensor, every analytical engine, every tactical display was screaming the same impossible truth. The object had not arrived. It had not decloaked. It had been there the entire time, perfectly hidden not by stealth technology, but by a complete lack of interaction with the fabric of spacetime. It did not register on gravity sensors because it had no mass. It did not register on energy sensors because it emitted no energy. It did not register on optical sensors because it did not reflect or refract light. It was simply not there until it chose to be. This was the myth. This was the ghost, the singularity, the phantom that had haunted the galactic consciousness. It was real, and it was more terrifyingly profound than any of them had ever imagined. A voice, calm and measured, filled the shuttle's cabin. It was a male human voice, speaking flawless hegemonic without the slightest hint of an accent. "Welcome, delegates of the Valthian hegemony. My name is Ambassador Kai. On behalf of the people of Earth, I thank you for accepting our invitation." The interior of the human vessel was as disorienting and profound as its exterior. When the hegemony delegation was transported aboard, not via a docking tube or a shimmering teleporter, but by a seamless transition where one moment they were in their shuttle and the next they were standing in a new environment, they found themselves not on a bridge or in a conference room, but in a space that defied easy description. It was a vast, open chamber, seemingly infinite in all directions. The floor was a translucent surface that looked down into the swirling heart of a nebula light years away. The ceiling was a perfect, real-time view of the galaxy, with the hegemony fleet visible as a tiny, glittering cluster in the distance. There was no discernible technology, no consoles, no wiring, no machinery. The air was perfectly recycled, the temperature comfortable, the gravity a standard one. The environment felt less constructed and more willed into being. Standing before them was a single human male. He was dressed in simple, unadorned gray robes that seemed to absorb the ambient light. He was of average height for his species, with dark hair and calm, intelligent eyes. There was no hint of aggression or superiority in his posture. He stood with a quiet, unassuming dignity, a scholar rather than a warrior. This was Ambassador Kai. The junior diplomat from Praetor Vess's retinue, a being named Shard Consul Prel, struggled to compose himself. His crystalline structure resonated with a high-frequency tremor of pure shock. The psionic adept accompanying him was reeling, her mind encountering not a psychic presence she could read, but a perfect, placid void, a calmness so absolute it was like a shield of polished thought. "Ambassador," Prel managed, his vocalizations tight and strained. "Your vessel, it is unlike any technology we have ever encountered." Kai offered a slight, serene smile. "It is not a vessel in the way you understand it. It is more of a localized intersection of dimensional realities. A place, we call it the Witness." The name sent a fresh tremor through the delegation. It was not a name of conquest or power, like Indomitable Will or Starrender. It was a name of passivity, of observation. It was deeply, philosophically unsettling. "You asked to meet," Kai continued, his voice even and gentle. "And we are here. We have observed your great civilizations for many of your centuries. We have studied your histories, your art, your philosophies. We find much to admire. We also find a recurring pattern of conflict, of dominance, of fear. You have come to our home with a fleet designed to inspire that same fear. You wish to know if the stories about us are true. You wish to understand our strength, so you may gauge whether we are a threat to be courted or a rival to be destroyed." There was no accusation in his tone, merely a statement of fact. He laid bare the hegemony's intentions with such disarming honesty that it left the diplomats speechless. "He is not hostile," the psionic adept projected weakly to Prell. "There is no deception. His mind is serene. It is like listening to the quiet hum of the universe itself. I have never encountered a consciousness so stable." "We do not desire conflict," Kai said, as if hearing the adept's thought. "It is an inefficient and illogical method of resolving disputes. It is born of a failure to communicate, a failure to understand. We have seen what it has done to your galaxy. The scars of 1,000 wars are etched into the stars themselves. The ghosts of fallen empires haunt the void. We chose a different path." Prell finally found his voice, a new sense of unease replacing his initial shock. This was not a negotiation, it was a lecture. The Scorn ascendancy, the pirate fleets, they were not defeated through communication. "Correct," Kai agreed without hesitation. "They were not offered a choice that aligned with their worldview. Their philosophy was one of consumption, of destruction. To them, anything that was not scorn was either a tool or an obstacle. You cannot reason with such a perspective. You can only demonstrate its limitations." He gestured with one hand, and the nebula below them swirled. An image formed in the depths, a perfect, three-dimensional tactical recreation. It showed a vast fleet of Scorn warships, monstrous, jagged things of fang and metal, descending upon a verdant human colony world. Then, from the blackness, the witness resolved into being, a silent ovoid of absolute night. "We did not fire a single weapon," Kai explained, his voice a calm counterpoint to the horrific imagery. "We did not detonate a single warhead. To do so would be to engage in their paradigm, to validate their belief that might is the ultimate arbiter of reality. Instead, we introduced a new variable. We projected a localized field of conceptual causality." The diplomat stared uncomprehending. Conceptual causality. "Everything in the universe is governed by a set of fundamental principles," Kai elaborated, his tone that of a patient teacher. "Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces. Your technology and ours is based on manipulating these principles. The Scorn warships operated because the principle of nuclear fusion within their drive cores was a constant. Their weapons fired because the principle of directed energy discharge was reliable. We simply suggested otherwise. Within a localized radius of this vessel, we introduced a temporary overriding axiom. These things are no longer true." In the holographic display, the Scorn fleet died. Their drive cores did not explode. They simply went cold. Their weapon ports did not overload. They simply became inert pieces of metal. The lights on their ships flickered out, not from a power failure, but because the concept of electrical conductivity within their systems had been temporarily suspended. In the space of a single heartbeat, an entire armada was transformed from a ravenous predator into a collection of lifeless, drifting tombs. The crews were left unharmed, but utterly, absolutely powerless. "We did not destroy them," Kai said softly. "We presented them with an undeniable truth, that their understanding of the universe was incomplete, that their reliance on force was a reliance on a set of rules that could be rewritten at any time. We left them adrift to contemplate this new reality, to understand that there are powers in the universe that cannot be fought, only accepted. It is a harsh lesson, but a necessary one." The survivors, when they were eventually rescued by their own, spread the story. The myth, a weapon more powerful than any fleet, the idea that resistance is not just futile but conceptually irrelevant. A profound, soul-crushing silence descended upon the hegemony delegation. This was the grand reveal. The humans were not a nascent military power. Why were not bluffing? They were something else entirely. They were not playing the same game. They had transcended the game itself. They were not warriors. They were mathematicians. They were philosophers with the ability to impose their logic upon the fabric of reality. Peter Vess, watching from his flagship, felt his crystalline structure vibrate with a new emotion, something he had not felt in millennia. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was a deep, chilling sense of awe. He was staring into a gulf of understanding so vast that his own civilization, for all its eons of existence, seemed like a child playing with stones on the shore of an infinite ocean. "They do not have a warship," he whispered, the realization striking him with the force of a physical blow. That thing is a tool for editing reality. They are not a military power. They are a philosophical one." Elder Kalen's resonant chime was somber, heavy with the weight of this new understanding. "And now we understand their silence, their lack of posturing. Why would a being who can command the laws of physics need to boast of its strength? The ocean does not need to declare its power to the sand. It simply is. Back within the witness, Kai turned his calm gaze back to the stunned delegation. We have shown you this not to threaten you, but to inform you, to end the cycle of suspicion and fear before it begins. Your hegemony is built on a foundation of checks and balances, of military parity and strategic alliances. We do not fit into that equation. We have no desire to conquer your territory, to seize your resources, or to impose our culture upon you. We seek only to exist, to learn, and to ensure that the cacophony of war does not drown out the faint, beautiful music of the cosmos. His gesture encompassed the galactic view above them. Your arrival here was not unexpected. It was, in fact, necessary. Your fear and curiosity had reached a tipping point. We could have remained a myth, a ghost story that kept the predators at bay. But myths breed superstition, and superstition breeds fanaticism. The truth, even a difficult truth, is always superior. Now you know. The question is, what will you, the Valthian hegemony, do with this truth? The question hung in the impossible space, a challenge far greater than any declaration of war. The hegemony had come seeking to measure a potential rival's strength. Instead, they had been handed the scale of the universe itself and been forced to find their own place on it. The delegation was transported back to their shuttle with the same seamless, inexplicable transition. They were left alone in the void, with the silent, black ovoid of the witness hanging in space before them, a patient, silent question mark aimed at the heart of their civilization. The power dynamic of the galaxy had not just shifted, it had been fundamentally and irrevocably redefined. The journey back to the hegemony fleet was conducted in absolute silence. The minds of the three delegates were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: terror, reverence, a profound sense of their own galactic insignificance. What they had witnessed was not a weapon, but a statement of existence so far beyond their own that it forced a complete reevaluation of everything they thought they knew about power, technology, and the nature of life itself. When their report was delivered to the assembled fleet commanders, it was met with a stunned, disbelieving quiet. Praetor Vess, for the first time in his long existence, did not have a retort. The hard, sharp light of his crystalline form was dimmed, muted, as if the very energy that animated him was cowed by the sheer conceptual weight of the human's revelation. The Grand Armada, which had arrived with such arrogance and pomp, now seemed small and fragile. Their weapons, capable of cracking continents and igniting stars, were like children's toys. Their mighty engines, which bent space and time, were mere parlor tricks compared to a power that could persuade reality to change its mind. A council of war was convened, though the term war now seemed absurdly inappropriate. The debate was no longer about containment or preemptive strikes. Such concepts were laughable. The new debate was philosophical, existential. "We cannot fight them," declared a scorned commander, his voice, usually a guttural roar, now a subdued rumble. "To even contemplate it is to prove we have learned nothing. They could have erased us. They could have erased our entire species from existence with a thought. Instead, they left us alive. They gave us a lesson. We would be fools of the highest order not to heed it." Matron Zethal's psionic voice flowed through the assembled minds, a cool balm on their frayed nerves. "This is not a military or a political entity we are facing. It is a force of nature, or perhaps something beyond nature. They called their vessel the Witness. The name is the key. They are not participants. They are obs. Irvers, their intervention against the Scorn was not an act of war. It was an act of cosmic curation. The Scorn's path of mindless consumption was a discordant note in the symphony they are listening to. They did not destroy the instrument. They simply tuned it. Elder Kalen's chimes resonated with a deep, weary wisdom. "For generations, we have been the oldest, the wisest, the most powerful. We have guided the development of this galactic arm for good or ill. We have seen empires rise and fall, species ascend and wither. We believed ourselves to be the pinnacle of evolution. Today, we have learned that we are but children in a garden, and the gardeners have finally made themselves known. They do not wish to weed us out. They wish for us to grow in a more harmonious pattern." But Praetor Vess, his pride shattered but his analytical mind still sharp, found a new line of inquiry. A deeper, more unsettling question. "Why now?" he chimed, his light flickering with renewed intensity. "They say they have watched us for centuries. Why reveal themselves at this moment? What has changed? Their hand was forced by our arrival, yes, but the existence of the Witness implies a purpose. A tool of that magnitude is not created without a reason. You do not build a key that can rewrite the universe unless there is a lock you intend to open, or a door you intend to keep shut." His question hung in the silent calm channel between the ships. He was right. The humans' calm, their philosophical detachment, their incredible power, it all pointed to a context that the hegemony was not yet privy to. They were acting on a scale of foresight and understanding that was as far beyond the hegemony as the hegemony was beyond a single-celled organism. Their actions were not a reaction to the hegemony's fleet, but part of a much larger, much older plan. The decision was made, not by vote but by a slow, dawning consensus. The hegemony would not retreat in fear, nor would it posture with false bravado. It would do the one thing it had never truly done before. It would listen, truly listen. Peter Vess, in an act of unprecedented humility, opened a direct channel to the witness. He did not send a diplomat. He spoke himself, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. Ambassador Kai, this is Peter Vess of the Valthian hegemony. We have considered your demonstration. We have misunderstood you. We approached you with the tools of conflict because they are the only tools we have known. We see now that you possess a different kind. We wish to learn. We ask for a true dialogue. Not as a potential adversary, but as a younger species seeking the guidance of its elders. There was a long pause. The entire hegemony fleet held its collective breath. Then Kai's calm voice returned. That, Praetor, is the wisest decision your hegemony has made in 10,000 years. We accept. But the dialogue will not happen here. It will happen where it is needed. We have waited for a partner with the wisdom to ask the right questions. Come. There is something you must see. The ovoid of the witness did not move, but the starfield around the hegemony fleet shifted. It was not the jarring lurch of hyperspace or the disorienting fold of a wormhole. The universe itself seemed to pivot around them. Constellations rearranged themselves in a silent, graceful ballet. The distant smudge of the galactic core swelled, growing brighter, closer. They were being moved, the entire armada, across tens of thousands of light years in an instant, but without any sense of travel. They were simply in one place, and then they were in another. They emerged into a region of space unlike any they had ever seen. It was a graveyard, a cosmic battlefield of truly unimaginable scale. Here, at the edge of the galaxy, hung the shattered remnants of celestial objects. Stars, not planets, had been cracked open like eggs, their cores guttering out like dying embers. Black holes were ringed with the decaying orbits of what might have been artificial megastructures. And everywhere there was a strange, pervasive radiation, a signature that was not of this universe, a lingering echo of energies that violated known physical laws. But the most terrifying sight was the thing that lay at the center of the devastation. It was a structure, if the word even applied. A vast, silent lattice of interconnected, perfectly geometric shapes that stretched for millions of kilometers. It was dark, non-reflective, and seemed to drink the light of the few remaining stars. It was clearly artificial, but its design was utterly alien, built on principles of non-Euclidean geometry that made the mind ache to look at it. And it was broken. Vast sections were shattered, rent asunder by forces that defied comprehension. It looked like a shield that had been broken, a wall that had been breached. Kai's voice filled the bridges of the hegemony fleet, now imbued with a profound gravity. This is why we exist, Praetor. This is why we have remained silent, why we have cultivated our unique understanding of the universe. This is the great filter. The hegemony commanders stared at the impossible artifact, the truth of their existence crashing down upon them. All intelligent life in the galaxy wondered why the universe was so silent, why they seemed to be alone. The theories were endless. Life was rare, civilizations inevitably destroyed themselves, they were the first. The truth was far more terrifying. For eons, Kai's voice explained, life in this galaxy has risen, reached a certain level of technological and social maturity, and then it has been harvested. Extinguished by a force from outside, from the void between galaxies. We do not know what they are, we only know their methods. They are patient. They wait for a civilization to become sufficiently advanced to broadcast its existence with enough power, and then they come. He continued, this structure, we call it the Sentinel Array. It was not built by us. It was built by a civilization that came before 1 billion years ago, a civilization that faced the same threat. It was a shield, a detection grid, a weapon. It fought them, and it lost. But in its dying moments it sent out a final warning, a complex data packet encoded into the quantum foam, a message in a bottle thrown into the ocean of space-time. The pieces began to fit together in the minds of the hegemony leaders. The humans' sudden technological leap, their philosophical detachment, their incredible power. Our species found that message, Kai said. Buried deep in the quantum structure of our own planet's star, it was a blueprint, a legacy. It contained the knowledge that allowed us to understand and manipulate the fundamental axioms of reality. It was a gift from a dead civilization, a desperate plea for their successors to be ready. We are not some miraculous evolutionary anomaly. We are the inheritors of a billion-year-old duty. We are the next line of defense. The purpose of the witness was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. It was not a warship. It was a research station. A tool for studying, understanding, and ultimately fighting a war on a level the hegemony could not even comprehend. The pacification of the Scorn was not a philosophical statement. It was a weapons test. The humans' silence and isolation were not a strategy. It was a quarantine to keep the galaxy quiet, to avoid attracting the attention of the hunters in the dark. "We have been watching you," yes, Kai admitted. "Waiting, hoping that another species would mature beyond petty conflict, that another civilization would grow wise enough to be a potential ally. Your arrival in our system was the final test. Had you come with open aggression, we would have pacified you as we did the Scorn and continued our work alone. But you did not. You hesitated. You chose diplomacy. You chose to listen. And in doing so, you proved you were ready to hear the truth." A new image appeared, projected from the witness for the hegemony fleet to see. It was a long-range sensor reading, amplified and clarified by the humans' impossible technology. It showed the blackness of intergalactic space. But it was not empty. Far, far out in the void, a fleet was coming. A fleet of such size and energy that it defied measurement, and it was heading directly for their galaxy. "They are coming back," Kai said, his voice now devoid of its earlier calm, replaced by a steely, resolute urgency. "The signal that led them to the builders of the Sentinel array has long faded, but recently a new one has begun to shine in the darkness. The combined energy signature of all the warring civilizations of this galactic arm. Your empires, your conflicts, your broadcasts. You have been lighting a beacon in the dark, calling out to the wolves, and they have finally heard you." The final, terrible truth settled upon the hegemony. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were the cause of its potential doom. Their endless wars, their pride, their ceaseless expansion, it had all been a dinner bell ringing out across the cosmic abyss. The humans were not a threat. They were the galaxy's only, terrifyingly slim hope. Praetor Vess looked from the image of the approaching extragalactic fleet to the silent, black ovoid of the human vessel. He saw the broken shield of the ancients. He saw the graveyard of stars. His own civilization, his entire worldview, had been shattered and rebuilt in the space of a single day. The myth of the human warship was dead. In its place was a reality far grander and more terrifying than any of them could have conceived. They were no longer debating the fate of their empires. They were facing the fate of their galaxy. What do we do?" Vess chimed, his voice small, the question not of a praetor to an ambassador, but of a child to a guardian. Kai's voice was the answer, not just to him, but to all of them. It was a voice that held the weight of 1,000,000,000 ye. Hours of sacrifice, and the burning light of a final, desperate hope. "Now," the humans said, as the image of the enemy fleet filled the void before them, "we prepare together.